My wife spent our savings on a vacation with her lover while I paid every bill, so I divorced her and walked away clean. I'm a 32-year-old guy who's always believed that hard work and responsibility could protect a marriage. From the moment I met Lauren, I thought I'd found someone who made sense of everything, the way she laughed at the dumbest jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited about something, and the subtle ways she made me feel like the world was right when I was with her. I still remember our first apartment together, the tiny kitchen that barely fit 2 people, and how I promised myself I'd take care of everything so she never had to worry. I handled the bills, the mortgage, utilities, even the groceries, anything that kept the life we were building together afloat. It wasn't about control, it was about love. In my mind, love meant sacrifice, and I prided myself on being dependable, the guy who would always show up no matter what. Lauren had this charm that could make anything feel like magic, but sometimes her words would slip in ways that caught my attention. She'd joke about wanting more money, or casually compare our apartment to friends' penthouses, or mention vacations she'd never let me plan. I laughed it off. I told myself it was harmless, just banter between us, and that a little harmless dreaming didn't matter if I was keeping everything else together. I ignored that tiny knot in my stomach, convincing myself it was just her personality, just harmless teasing. Every evening, I'd come home from work, exhausted but content, seeing her smile and thinking I was doing something right. I thought that as long as I carried the weight, our love was untouchable. I didn't know that my devotion, my hours of overtime, my careful balancing of every cent, was planting the seeds for a betrayal I couldn't even imagine. Little did I know, the very trust and dedication I poured into our life together would soon be used against me in ways that would shatter everything I thought I knew. Things started shifting slowly, almost imperceptibly, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Lauren began spending more evenings, out with friends, or at work events, and weekends that used to be ours felt suddenly empty. At first, I told myself it was normal, everyone needed space, and I was always too tired anyway, but there was this growing pit in my stomach I couldn't shake. I remember one Friday night, coming home from a 12-hour shift, the apartment dark and quiet, and asking, "Hey, you out tonight?" She smiled, waved it off, "Just a girl's thing, babe. Nothing big." But her tone didn't match her words, it had a weight I couldn't place. I tried keeping the marriage alive, doing little things that used to make her smile, cooking her favorite meals, leaving notes, paying for small surprises. "You always do so much for us," she'd say, sipping her wine, but I started noticing the faint edge in her eyes, the way she'd glance at her phone and stiffen whenever it buzzed. It wasn't anything concrete yet, just tiny inconsistencies that made me question myself. I caught myself thinking, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm imagining it, even as a small voice whispered, "Something isn't right." I started piecing together small moments, the unexplained texts she'd quickly delete, the casual mentions of plans I wasn't invited to, the way her laughter sometimes sounded hollow on the phone. I tried confronting her lightly, "Who were you texting just now?" She'd shrug, "No one important, don't worry about it." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. That growing distance became a quiet, gnawing tension in our home, like a storm building behind closed doors. Every smile she gave me felt slightly rehearsed, every conversation slightly guarded. I kept thinking about all the hours I'd spent making sure we were secure, safe, and comfortable, and wondering if it meant anything at all. I didn't realize it yet, but the life I thought I was protecting was slowly slipping through my fingers, and the betrayal I feared was inching closer every day. I started noticing the little things I'd ignored before, the kind of things that make your gut twist but are easy to dismiss if you don't want to believe the truth. Lauren would joke about wanting a new car, a bigger house, trips to places we couldn't afford, and I'd laugh with her, nodding along, even though inside I felt a flicker of unease. One night, I asked, "Do you really want all that?" She shrugged, smiling, "Of course, who wouldn't," and I smiled back, pretending I didn't feel the sting. It wasn't just the money talk, it was the way she began treating my efforts as something expected, as if I owed her happiness. I remember walking into the kitchen and seeing a small pile of receipts I hadn't authorized, expensive dinners, hotel stays, spa treatments, and feeling my chest tighten. What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed it off, brushing it aside. "Oh, just a few things I wanted, nothing major, babe. Relax." But her eyes darted away, and the laughter sounded brittle, forced. That forced smile was the first real crack I noticed in her facade, and it made a cold weight settle in my stomach. I wanted to believe it was harmless, that I was overthinking. Maybe I had just been working too much, too tired to see things clearly. But when my friends casually mentioned that Lauren had been talking about treating herself and bragging about trips they weren't inviting me to, I felt my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt before. I started questioning everything, every compliment, every affectionate touch, every "we're in this together" promise. Something felt off, and I couldn't pretend I was blind anymore. The apartment, once a place I associated with comfort and love, started feeling smaller, darker, heavier. Even the smell of her perfume, something I used to find comforting, now made my stomach churn with unease. I didn't know it yet, but those tiny inconsistencies, those little lies, were the first real warning signs of a betrayal that would shatter everything I thought I knew. It hit me like a punch to the gut when I finally found out about the vacation. I'd heard from a friend that Lauren had booked a week-long trip supposedly with some coworkers, but the details didn't add up. The more I dug, the clearer it became, this wasn't just a casual getaway. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, scrolling through photos she'd forgotten to hide, and realizing she was with another man, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. The nausea hit me before the anger did. I couldn't believe the woman I trusted with my life had taken our savings to live out some secret fantasy with someone else. I confronted her that night. "Lauren, what is this? Who's he?" My voice shook, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. She looked at me, calm and unnervingly composed, and said, "It's none of your business." I needed a break. A break? My savings? My trust? Everything I'd worked for. My chest tightened, the room felt smaller, the air heavy. I could barely breathe, the realization crashing over me that every bill I'd paid, every sacrifice I'd made, had funded her betrayal. I remember the sound of the rain against the window that night, the apartment feeling colder than ever, as if the walls themselves knew what had happened. My anger burned hot, but there was also a hollow ache, a betrayal so deep I felt it in my bones. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But I couldn't. I just sat there, trembling, staring at the evidence that my life, as I knew it, had been built on lies. And even as I thought about confronting her further, I couldn't shake the fear. What else had she taken from me? I had no idea that this discovery would only be the beginning, that the real devastation was still coming. The confrontation with Lauren was worse than I imagined. It felt like peeling back layers of someone I thought I knew, only to find a stranger underneath. I remember standing in the living room, fists clenched, voice tight with anger. "How could you do this? With him? With our money?" Her calmness was infuriating. She looked at me, almost bored, and said, "I needed excitement. I wasn't happy. You're so predictable." Every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest, the life we built together crumbling with each syllable. I wanted answers, closure, something, anything to make sense of it, but there was nothing. She didn't apologize, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to care. I asked, "What about us? Everything we worked for? Everything I did for you?" She shrugged. "That was just what I expected. You did what you were supposed to." The casual cruelty of her words hit me harder than the betrayal itself. I realized, in that moment, that the love I thought was mutual had been a lie, a tool for her own gain. The apartment, once warm and filled with shared laughter, now felt suffocating. The walls seemed closer, the air thick, every familiar sound grating on my nerves. I paced, ran my hands through my hair, trying to force myself to process what I was seeing. I kept asking, why? Why would you do this to me? And she just stared, indifferent, as if the question itself was ridiculous. I finally sank into the couch, exhausted, humiliated, heart racing. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, tangible, a direct hit to everything I'd built. And even as the anger surged, I couldn't shake the sickening feeling that this was only the beginning, that I had no idea how deep the manipulation ran or how much more I would discover in the coming days. I hit rock bottom that night, the kind of low that makes your chest ache and your mind race with questions you don't want answers to. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside me where Lauren had once slept, the sheets cold and tangled. Every memory of our marriage, every dinner I cooked, every bill I covered, every sacrifice I made, suddenly felt meaningless. I thought about our savings, gone, vanished, used to fund her affair, and I felt a mix of fury and crushing despair that made my hands shake. The apartment felt like a cage, every familiar corner now a reminder of her betrayal. I kept replaying her words over and over, "You did what you were supposed to." The indifference in her tone was deafening. I tried calling friends, anyone who could ground me, but even their voices couldn't cut through the hollow feeling inside. I realized that I had been living in a bubble of denial, convinced that hard work and loyalty were enough to protect our marriage, only to have it all ripped away in an instant. I remember standing in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge loud in the silence, trying to convince myself to do something, anything. I thought about confronting her again, screaming, throwing things, but even that seemed pointless. Anger alone wouldn't undo the damage. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a complete dismantling of the life I had meticulously built. I sank onto the couch, staring at the rain streaking the windows, the apartment colder than it had ever felt. My mind wandered to the future, but every thought ended in despair. How could I rebuild, trust again, or even function knowing the woman I loved had used me for months without a shred of guilt? I didn't know it yet, but this moment, this hollow, gut-wrenching despair, would be the catalyst for reclaiming my life. The question was, could I turn the devastation into something I could survive, and eventually, something I could win from? After the initial shock wore off, I realized I couldn't stay paralyzed by anger and despair. I needed clarity. I started piecing things together, quietly collecting evidence, messages she thought I'd never see, receipts she accidentally left in plain sight, social media posts that contradicted her lies. Every discovery was like another layer of betrayal peeled back, and the more I found, the more I understood just how calculated this had been. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, laptop open, heart pounding, staring at photo after photo of her laughing on that vacation with him, knowing it had been paid for with everything I'd worked for. It was infuriating, humiliating, and yet strangely empowering. Finally, I had proof, I had clarity. I could see it all now, the flirty texts she deleted in seconds, the work calls, at odd hours, the subtle hints that I'd ignored because I wanted to believe in us. Each piece of evidence told the same story: my trust had been weaponized, my loyalty exploited, and my love used as a means to an end. I remember whispering to myself, "You thought you could break me, huh? You thought I'd never see it?" The anger shifted into determination. I wasn't going to let this continue, and I wasn't going to crumble under it. I began planning, mapping out every step carefully, protecting what remained of my finances, documenting everything for legal protection, and thinking about the divorce that would cut her out of my life completely. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the emotional aftermath, the nights I cried alone, the meals I didn't touch, the quiet apartment echoing with her absence. But there was also a strange clarity, a sense that I was finally taking control of my story. Even as I felt the sting of betrayal, I knew something fundamental had shifted inside me. The same hands that once covered every bill, worked every overtime shift, and kept everything together were now ready to reclaim everything she had tried to steal. And deep down, I knew the coming weeks would be the turning point, the moment I could finally walk away with power, dignity, and the life she thought she could destroy. I made the decision that night: divorce was the only way forward. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies, betrayal, and financial exploitation. I hired a lawyer and started meticulously planning my steps, making sure every bit of our remaining finances was protected. I remember sitting in the office, documents spread across the desk, heart racing, realizing that I finally had control over the situation. It was a strange mix of relief and lingering anger, the kind that makes your hands shake but your mind feels sharp and focused. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer, not emotionally, not financially. Even during this preparation, Lauren tried to push back in subtle ways. She'd drop comments like, "Don't be dramatic," or "You're overthinking this," trying to make me doubt my own decisions. But I saw through it now. Every manipulation, every attempt to guilt me, only made me more determined. I documented everything, messages, transactions, lies, turning her own deceit into concrete evidence I could use to protect myself. I started thinking about the life I wanted once this was over, an apartment of my own, financial stability, emotional freedom. The vision gave me strength, and I began feeling something I hadn't in months, hope. It was fragile, flickering, but it was there. I realized that walking away wouldn't just be about leaving her, it would be about reclaiming myself, piece by piece. Even as I strategized, there was still a gnawing tension. I didn't know how far her lies would go in court, or what else she might try to hide. But for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like I had a plan. A path forward. And deep down, I knew that soon, very soon, I would have the upper hand, and she would be powerless to stop it. The divorce proceedings were like stepping into a battlefield I never wanted to fight, but I knew I had to. Lauren tried to twist the story, claiming that the money she spent was some joint decision, or that I was overreacting, but I had every message, every receipt, every lie documented. I remember sitting in the courtroom, the tension pressing down on me, watching her confidently tell half-truths while I felt a surge of quiet fury building. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. She attempted to claim some of our remaining savings as shared investments, but my lawyer dismantled her argument piece by piece. Each lie she told only strengthened my case, every contradiction making her look smaller, weaker, and more exposed. I could see the shock in her eyes when the evidence was laid bare, proof of every vacation, every hotel, every lie she tried to pass off as innocent. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with the sound of shuffling papers and the occasional gasp. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, even as my chest tightened from the memories of betrayal. Every question she dodged, every glance she avoided, confirmed what I already knew: the person I had loved so deeply had built her life on deception. I sat there, heart hammering, realizing that the power had shifted. For the first time since discovering the affair, I wasn't the victim. I was in control. I had the evidence, the strategy, and the clarity to ensure that her attempts to manipulate me failed completely. Even as the judge prepared to make a ruling, the weight of months of emotional and financial betrayal pressed down on me. I knew that the verdict would be the final nail in the coffin of the life she had tried to control, and that soon, I would be free to reclaim what was mine, and my peace of mind. The day of the verdict felt surreal, like I was standing on the edge of something I had both feared and longed for. I sat in the courtroom, palms sweating, heart racing, listening as the judge outlined every piece of evidence I had painstakingly gathered. Lauren sat across from me, pale, her confident facade cracking with every word. When the judge ruled in my favor, acknowledging the affair, the misuse of our savings, and granting the divorce finalization, I felt a mix of relief, vindication, and a strange, quiet triumph. I remember exhaling so deeply I thought my lungs might collapse, feeling years of stress, betrayal, and anger pour out in that single breath. Even as I absorbed the victory, I thought about all the nights I had cried alone, the endless hours of work to cover our bills, the sacrifices I had made, and the complete disregard she had shown for everything I did. "It's over," I whispered to myself, almost as if saying it aloud would make it real. She had tried one last manipulation, claiming that she deserved a share of the remaining funds, but the court shut her down decisively. Seeing her reaction, the mix of disbelief and humiliation on her face, was a quiet, almost poetic justice. Walking out of the courthouse, the air outside felt different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. The city noises, the cars, the chatter, the distant sirens, no longer felt overwhelming, they felt alive, part of a world I could finally rejoin without her shadow hanging over me. I started imagining life on my terms, a place of my own, finances intact, freedom to breathe without manipulation. Even in that moment of victory, I knew the emotional scars wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt a deep sense of closure. The worst was behind me, and I was ready to step into a life I controlled completely, unburdened by lies and deceit. Moving out of the apartment we shared felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. I remember carrying the last of my boxes through the door, the echo of each footstep sounding like a drumbeat of freedom. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the constant weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I found a small, modest apartment of my own, the kind of space that didn't feel like hers, that wasn't tainted by her lies. Setting up my life again, unpacking boxes, hanging photos of friends and family who actually mattered, I felt a strange joy, simple, quiet, but powerful. Therapy helped too. Talking through months of manipulation and heartbreak made me realize how much I had endured without fully acknowledging it. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted away from while being consumed by work and a crumbling marriage. Their laughter, their presence, reminded me what normal felt like, what genuine connection was. I started planning small things just for myself, weekend hikes, evening dinners at new restaurants, trips I could actually afford without guilt. Slowly, the anger I had carried began to transform into focus, determination, and a deep, satisfying sense of empowerment. I realized that while Lauren had tried to take everything from me, she had underestimated one thing, my resilience. Even subtle reminders of her betrayal, an unexpected text, a social media post, could no longer shake me. I had built boundaries, protected my finances, and reclaimed my peace. The freedom I felt was intoxicating, a stark contrast to the fear and despair I had lived with for so long. And in those quiet moments, I allowed myself a small, private satisfaction. I had walked away clean, untouched in dignity, and stronger than ever before. But even as I embraced this new chapter, a lingering thought persisted: would she ever understand the depth of what she had lost, or would she continue oblivious to the life she had destroyed? Looking back now, the betrayal feels almost surreal, like a nightmare I once lived that has finally ended. I reflect on the months of heartbreak, the exhaustion from carrying a life that wasn't fully mine, and the financial manipulation that left me questioning everything I believed about trust and love. But I also see the transformation, how every tear, every sleepless night, every pang of anger, forged a version of myself I hadn't met before. I moved forward with clarity, choosing self-respect over revenge, freedom over bitterness, and honesty over manipulation. Walking away clean wasn't just about leaving Lauren, it was about reclaiming my life, my choices, and my dignity. I rebuilt slowly but deliberately, establishing routines that centered on me, my goals, and my mental health. Therapy helped untangle the emotional web she had woven, and reconnecting with friends and family reminded me what genuine care felt like. I even found joy in small victories, paying my own bills without worry, planning a solo trip, laughing freely without guilt or fear. I realized that sometimes the true shock of betrayal isn't the act itself but the power of walking away and thriving in spite of it. Months later, Lauren tried reaching out, probably expecting regret, anger, or maybe even reconciliation. I ignored it. There was nothing left to give her, no trust, no love, no space in my life for someone who had weaponized it all. Instead, I focused on me, on building a life untainted by manipulation, and on the quiet satisfaction of knowing I would never let someone else steal my peace again. And as I sit here now, finally free, I understand the lesson clearly: real power isn't revenge. Real power is surviving the betrayal, reclaiming your life, and walking away with your dignity intact, stronger than you ever imagined.